Okay, let us start with the Mangalacharan. We'll pray to obeisance to Sri Radha Govinda. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Nananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manabhishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnamscha Shri Rupam Sagarajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vittam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakana Vittamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dino Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamam Hari Priye Vancha Kalpaturabhyascha Kripa Sindhave Vacha Patitam Nam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschat Jayo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So what we have a short quick recap. So what did Krishna say in the last chapter? It was all about how to remember Krishna at the time of death. If you remember him at Antakale, then we surely get to his abode. He'll get to his nature. He said that. And without doubt, don't doubt it. So, and you can remember Krishna by meditation. That's also there where people do the Ashtanga Yoga thing. They will very severe practice of yogic. They will be meditating on the Paramatma and slowly they can reach the Samadhi stage and try to reconnect to the Lord. Okay, that's also there. They have the, it can be done, but it is not that easy. So he says pure devotional service. That's where he talked about Ananya Bhakti. That by remembering Krishna throughout your life, I think. So we don't know when the time comes. So by thinking of him and flinchingly doing the service to the Lord, what happens? You can remember even at the final hour. Or even if you don't, but Krishna will know because you've been doing it throughout your life. So that pure devotional service will help us to go back to him. And then, in order to inspire us, he also talked about the spiritual world, which is much different from the material world. Material world is Dukkhalaya and is Ashwasam. It is full of misery. It gives us only anxiety and it is temporary. And we are all the time caught in that cycle of birth and death. And he talked about the annihilation, 3 kinds of it at the end of Brahma's day. And during the night, Brahma's night, we will be annihilated. And again, when the day comes, we are back into this material. And then finally in the Mahapralaya, when we go back to it. So by that, our material world is there, but it is temporary and it is not anything. So then the only world which is eternal and blissful is the spiritual world, which he talked about. And that's why we need to go back. That should be our goal in human life. Then he said how only by devotional service we can attain the Sukhi. So finally, now what happens in this step? So in chapter 8, Krishna was explained that Ananya devotee surpasses the path of light and darkness. He doesn't have to know how to, because yogis means they have to know the auspicious moment when they can leave the body and all that. That is the highest level they would have done in the meditation. But, and the karma is, they also by accidentally, if they go by the light, they might reach Brahma Jyoti. Otherwise, they will go to higher planets. Otherwise, they can't. Okay. Whereas the bhaktas, they don't have to bother about it because by devotional service, they will surely go back to him. So now, how to become such a devotee is what is now talked about in this chapter. Chapter 8 concludes that bhakti is the best form of yoga. Chapter 9 supplies the specific knowledge required for performing the most confidential yoga. How to do this bhakti yoga is what is being taught now, which is the knowledge which is being given now in this chapter, how to become a Ananya Bhakta. So actually 7 and 9 is almost identical because in 7, Krishna talks about his two energies, material energy and the superior energy. And this material energy is what it is controlling this whole universe. And we are in this universe, so we are under the influence of material energy. And material energy is controlled by the Lord. But actually, it says we are also a superior energy, but since we have come under the influence of the material energy, we get conditioned. Jiva gets conditioned here and we forget our relationship with the Lord. So chapter 7 and chapter 9 are actually virtually identical. But in chapter 8, what happens, when there was a doubt by Arjuna, so he cleared up certain points, especially how to remember him at the time of death. So that was some points which was clarified. So here, the most confidential knowledge. So here, first Krishna talks about the qualification and the disqualification for understanding this science of bhakti. Then, what is the 8 attributes about the bhakti? Then there's a lot of Aishwarya Gnana, Krishna Sachinta Vedari, and his relationship with the material world. Okay. Then it talks about the non-worshippers and worship. See, here he gives us the whole perspective, 360 degrees. He doesn't leave out any angle. No, we have to look at everything. So if you understand what a non-worshipper is, then we'll understand how we should become a worshipper and not follow them, right? So you have to see both sides of the coin, right? So he talks about non-worshippers and the worshippers. Because if we know so Lord is the supreme personality of Godhead, then why people do not worship him? Then he talks about how he is a supreme object of worship and glories of directly worshipping Krishna. So he talks up. So he ends up with this. Okay, we'll just focus on these first two things, right? So hearing about Krishna, qualifications and disqualifications. So there are two things come. Non-enviousness allows one to hear confidential knowledge about Krishna. And faithlessness forces one to birth and death. So envy and faithlessness, these will be disqualifiers. What do we mean by envy? Envy means it's not jealous, but it is something more about that. That is, I like what the other person has, but I don't like the fact that he's having. It should be me who has it, not him. That's how the envious purpose. There will be envious of some person. It could be envious of his success or envious of his beauty or his riches or whatever it is. So envy is something which you think why he should have it. It should be me who's having it. That's the kind of attitude. So envy, that if we are envious of Krishna, that's why we are here, because we wanted to enjoy this thing independent of, and we didn't want to be like with Krishna. So that's once we get that, we have come into this material world, right? So Bhagavan Uvacha idam tu te guhya tamam pavekshami anasuyave. Anasuyave means envious. That's a way. Gnanam vijnana sahitam yad jnatva mokshasi supat. Supreme Lord said, my dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most secret wisdom, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. So he's saying Guhyatama. Actually, in Bhagavad Gita, we are getting a lot of confidential matters. The first thing which we learned, I think we can see the purport. Purport is given nicely. You can read also. So anybody wants to read? Hare Krishna. Vikram Prabhuji?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay, Prabhuji.
May I start, Mataji?
Yes, Mata, Prabhuji.
As a devotee hears more and more about the Supreme Lord, he becomes enlightened. The hearing process, the hearing process is recommended in Srimad Bhagavatam. The messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if topics regarding the Supreme Godhead are discussed amongst devotees. This cannot be achieved by the association of the mental speculator or academic scholar, for it is a realized knowledge. The devotees are constantly engaged in the Supreme Lord's service. The Lord understands the mentality and sincerity of a particular living entity who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and gives him the intelligence to understand the science of Krishna in the association of devotees. Discussion of Krishna is very potent, and if a fortunate person has such association and tries to assimilate the knowledge, then he will surely make advancement towards a spiritual realization. Lord Krishna, in order to encourage Arjuna to higher and higher elevation in his potent service, describes in this 9th chapter matters more confidential than any he has already disclosed.
Here, one thing we have to see is the realized knowledge. Realized knowledge is not just bookish knowledge. He should have realized himself, right? Like, for example, like, the fire is burning. If you touch the fire, you will immediately feel the burning sensations. Okay. So that means you have realized that. Like that, people have realized the messages of the Lord. You should talk to them and not to, because these, the transcendental knowledge, whatever science which are talking, it should be realized internally. It cannot be just speculate, oh, this is right, or this, or you start giving your own logic and your own interpretation. That won't work. So that is what it says. It cannot be achieved by association of mental speculators or academic scholars, right? And it is, hearing is what important, because that is the most sensitive senses we have. Among all the senses which we have, hearing, because even when you're asleep, your hearing sense is still active, because the alarm rings, you get up, isn't it? So that is why hearing process is always recommended for to hear more and more about the Lord. So in the very beginning, the first chapter, it was an introduction to the rest of the book, right? The second and third chapter, spiritual knowledge described, is called confidential. What was the thing we saw in second and third? That we are the soul and not the body. And this is not talked about in the academic thing which we learn in our schools and colleges. Okay. And more condition. So once we know what we are, that we understood. That is, we are the soul and Namo. And then what do you do with that knowledge? Why were we here? So then topic discussed in the 7th and 8th chapters are specifically related to devotional service. And because they bring enlightenment in Krishna consciousness, they are called more confidential. Okay. So then what we saw our relationship. That means we are here and this is not our actual place. We are supposed to go back to our spiritual world. That's how we learned about our relationship. Then now in this chapter, these matters which are described in 9th chapter deal with unallowed pure devotion. How to go back, how to think. Therefore, this is called the most confidential, Guyatha. Okay, it's naturally done. Therefore, has no material pain. So if you understand this, then you'll be relieved from the material miseries. Okay, even if you are in this world. So in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Hare Krishna Prabhu, it is said that although one was sincere desire to render service, situated in the material, even if you are in the material world, but since if you are doing Ananya Bhakti, then it's as good as being in Vaikuntha. Okay, so we need now to do it. So the first, the Idam Jnanam, this knowledge refers to pure devotional service. Okay, and there are 9 activities: hearing, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Vandanam, Archanam, this is Dasyam, maintaining Sakyam, and Atmanived. So you can start anything, but for us, anything, this is what is most started in the thing. Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Smaranam. Okay. then only we go to higher levels of perfection. So then only when our heart is cleared of material contamination, we can understand this science. Okay. Simply to understand, just understanding living entity is not material, is not sufficient. That is only a beginning. And we should also recognize difference between activities of the body and spiritual activities. Then only we can, so we should also have the knowledge of spiritual activities. So that is what we are learning here. And so yeah, as I said, if we are envious of some person, then we can't, that person, with that person, we cannot have any relationship, isn't it? Because once we know that person is envious of me, then I won't share anything with him. I don't like to talk to him or have anything to do with him, right? Because, and also, so same way, if you are envious of Krishna, then we cannot relate to him. That's why Krishna says, Arjuna, you are not envious of me, so I'm giving you this knowledge, which is most confidential, Guhyatha. Okay. So this knowledge, about this knowledge of devotional service, he gives in the next verse a very nice thing. So what did we learn here? It's the most confidential one. It's the Raja, king of education, because this is the, if you understand this knowledge, then you can be relieved from the material business. What is the qualification? We should be free from envy. And what does envy do us? Actually, a person, envious person, will always try to find some fault in them. They wants to show that he is lower than him. He's not, and he is superior, and he's not superior, and like that. So we should be free from that. How can we be? We have to be humble. We should say we don't know. So what is the means to receive? By proper hearing, submissive hearing. And what are the benefits? Will be relieved from the miseries of material existence. Okay. The king is that's why it's known as the king of education. Then Krishna continues to tell about the attributes. What are the qualities of this education, knowledge? Raja Vidyam Raja Guhyam Pavitram. It is pure. Idam Uttamam. It is the most perfect. Pratyaksha Vagamam. Dharmyam. It is religious. Susukam. And joyfully performed. Kartam Avyayam. Everlasting. So it is the Uttamam. I mean Pavitram. Because most confidential is Raja, king of all knowledge. It is the essence of all doctrines and philosophies explained before. And it is the most confident. That is why it is kept in between the middle of the Bhagavad Gita. It's not kept at the end. And it is the most valuable thing. This is the essence of Bhagavad Gita, which you are learning, right? And how to go back to him. And actually, you know, what happens is we have come to Krishna consciousness, means we have come to ISKCON. It doesn't mean that we are already on the path. It's just a gate. We have opened the gate and we have entered that place. So how do we understand? How do we be on this path? How do we understand that? First and foremost, we should aspire for, we should desire to do it. Then Krishna will help us. If we don't desire and we are envious of him, he cannot help you, isn't it? So first we have to desire. And this is what Prabhupada did. He created that desire in the people. So when he met them, they had actually given up thing, you know, they became the outcast in the hippies, no? So they were outcasts of the society and they are given up a whole thing. To them, he inspired this, that gave them the desire, gave them, this is the goal to go back. So once they started desiring for it, and he was there to help them, and that changed that. So we should desire to go back, desire to be in this path. So this talks about the eternal activities of the soul and gives us the positive information. And then in the purport, here we talk about how it purifies. What is the purification, Pavitram? That is, what is that sinful actions we have done? We have done it out of ignorance because we didn't have the knowledge. We would have done a lot of sinful actions, right? And what happens to the sinful actions? There is a first starts with a sinful desire, bija. And then you will, because when you act on those desires, you will commit some papa. You will have some sinful reactions. And that will reactions either get manifested or it could be still in the unmanifested form. That is aparabdha. Okay. Well, let us understand this process. And actually, and then there's a kuta. Before that, some part of the sinful reactions will get manifested, prarabdha karma. Because of the prarabdha karma, we are in this body today. What you have got it from our karma, right? Past karmas, we have got this particular body today, right? And in this particular situation, in the particular family, and we have a certain, because of that reactions, we have a set of happiness and distress, which you have to do it in this particular life, right? Prarabdha. And still some part of it will still be there unmanifested. But what is the thing? Kutam is, even if you have not done once you have done it, there is still some tendency to do it. Still it will be lingering in your mind. Like, for example, I can give you, suppose a thief, he has done some stealing and he has been arrested, I think, and he's been put into the jail. Okay, he completed his term of thing and he comes back. But he will do stealing because the still it is there, that desire to steal. Though he has finished his penance, he has done it, but he might again do it. That sinful tendencies will still be there, like in an unconscious manner. And that at some time it might come up as a desire, and again you will be doing it. So, but prarabdha karma, you have done it, suffering. So part of it you could have atoned and you have done it and you have taken care of. But these two things, this kutam and bija, that is something which cannot be done by your control of your mind or your penance, prashchita. For that, you have to do devotional service. So sinful reaction has 4 stages. That's what we saw. And this is the one, devotional service is so strong, it will take care of all these things. It will slowly burn up all our kutam, that is bijas and the sinful disposition. That is why it is known as pavitra. This devotional service, bhakti yoga, if you take to, that will help us to come out of these tendencies and think, and we come. So pavitram implies all the 4 stages can be purified. Okay. And it implies it's beyond tamas. So unless we take to bhakti yoga, otherwise we'll be still be stuck in this thing. We will be coming out of this. We won't be able to come out of this cycle. Okay. So how to get direct perception of the self? By in the association of advanced devotees, because they will give us help to come out of it. And then example, like the chanting Hare Krishna without doubt, one feels transcendental pleasure and gets purified quickly. Also, if one further helps in the mission, one makes spiritual progress. So this is another, that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you start doing chanting this Hare Krishna Mahamantra, that helps us to purification. That is the one of the spiritual activities, Bhakti Yoga. And is there any qualification? No. Advancement is irrespective of previous education. So first, from wherever you are in whichever situation, if you can take to this Bhakti Yoga, because directly, and this is the advantage. Why Krishna talks about Bhakti Yoga is because you're able to even come out of that thing. As a perfection of religion. Because Arjuna was confused, what is duty was and what is not duty. So we'll understand this dharma clearly by practicing this Bhakti Yoga. And it is blissful because you're all the time joyful and it's eternally everlasting. So if you take, this is the 8 attributes, because if you take to this pure devotional service. So this is the most confidential knowledge which Krishna is imparting, right? So those who, and another thing, okay, you talked about this, then he's talking about those who are not faithful on the path of devotional service cannot attain. So you should have Shraddha, you should have faith. So that means you will think, why the minute you talk about spiritual thing or talk about the Lord, you talk about faith. Actually, faith is there in us all the time. Only thing we don't think about it. Here Krishna says you have to do this with faithfully. The devotional service you cannot attain, because otherwise you return to birth and death cycle in this material world. And faith is the Shraddha, no? That it is something like, as I said, no, it is there in us, it is a part of our life, but we don't recognize it. Like, for example, you put some money in the bank. Without faith, you won't put the money in the bank, isn't it? There would have been some faith. Or you take to, suppose you go to a restaurant and you order some food. You have faith in the purity of the food. Otherwise, you won't put it in the money. Do you go and check the license or how many, the history or anything? No. You have certain faith. Isn't it? Same way you go anywhere. So in your faith is the part of your life, but you're not thinking of it because it's there as a nature. So here Krishna says, if you are not faithful in this path of devotional service, you cannot attain. So two things are there, qualification. You should not envy Krishna and you should be faithful. Once you take to this path, you should be faithful. You should. Okay, let us see the purport is very nice. Anybody else? Alka Mataji, you want to try? Hare Krishna.
Yes,
The faithless cannot.
These who are not faithful in this devotional service cannot attain me, O conqueror of enemies. Therefore, they return to the path of birth and death in this material world. Purport. The faithfulness
Faithless.
cannot accomplish this process of devotional service. That is the purport of this verse. Faith is created by association with devotees. Unfortunate people, even after hearing all the evidence of Vedic literature from great personalities, still have no faith in God. They are hesitant to, cannot stay fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. Thus, faith is a most important factor for progress in Krishna consciousness. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that faith is the complete conviction that simply by serving the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, one can achieve all perfection. This is called real faith. As stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam.
You can read this meaning, Mataji, by giving water to the root.
Yes, by giving water to the root of a tree, one satisfies its branches, twigs, and leaves, and by supplying food to the stomach, one satisfies all the senses of the body. Similarly, by engaging in the transcendental service of the Supreme Lord, one automatically satisfies all the demigods and all other living entities. Therefore, after reading Bhagavad Gita, one should promptly come to the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. One should give up all other engagements and adopt the service of the Supreme Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead. If one is convinced of the philosophy of life, that is faith.
So that is what here it says, the faith is the most important. If you don't have that, you won't be able to be sustaining in this process of devotional service. Okay. And it has been told that real faith is you should have conviction that serving the Lord, you can achieve perfection. Serving that. So this is what Prabhupada, talked to the devotees, and the followers, they took to that path because they were convinced of this. They could see his example, they could see him in that, so conviction of this philosophy, and that is faith. By seeing him, by seeing the spiritual master, they were able to follow that. So development of that faith is the process of Krishna consciousness. So that's what he did. He developed the faith in them by giving this process. What is this Krishna consciousness? And then he continues to talk about 3 kinds of faith that you can all read later. So what is meant here is the 3 kinds of people. One who have no faith but simply engages in devotional service, he might not progress much because without faith you can't progress much. But the other kind of second kind of class of people, they have faith, but they are not so good in the scriptures. But there are second class of people. So at least by slowly reading the scriptures and things, they can cultivate the faith, they can strengthen the faith. That is clear. And there are first class people who have faith and they are well versed in the thing. So these are the three kinds of people who have the different stages of faith. So only if you want to be in this process, development of that process is faith is the process of Krishna consciousness. So whatever we are talking now, with the thing is Krishna is telling us how to develop this faith. This is the Bhakti Yoga. Okay. So faithless cannot attain Krishna. It's the most important factor for progress in Krishna consciousness. Simply by serving Krishna, one can achieve all perfection by association of devotees. And no good faith and knowledge will easily fall down, though engaged in such. This is the three kinds of faith. Faith, but not very advanced in simply trying to follow by association and simplicity. So this is where if you are not having faith and you try to be thing, then you may not success. You will fall down after some time. But if you have faith in the process and say, okay, this is what Krishna is saying and this is working, this is what Prabhupada has done it and we have seen the thing, then slowly you can advance by association with the devotees. Then you can reach the thing. Okay, that's the highest. So development of that faith is the process of Krishna consciousness. Fine. So then now Krishna is going to talk about his relationship with the material world. Because pervades, creates and annihilates the entire cosmos through his material energy. Although Krishna is a supreme director, the material world nevertheless moves independently and Krishna thus remains neutral and detached. So why is he talking about that? Because we are in this material world. So we have to know about the material energy and its connection to the Lord, right? So Maya tatam idam sarvam jagat avyakta murtina matsani sarva bhutani na chahum tesva avastita. By me in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. It's just like the sun is there, no? Sun is, you can feel the sunshine on the earth, right? You can see the sunshine. But sun is there. I mean, it is there, but you can see how the sunshine is pervading everywhere. Same way, Krishna is there, but his energy, his eating, he is pervading through his energy, and all beings are in me, but I am not in them. It looks contradictory, but it is true if you think deeply. And yet everything that is created does not rest in me. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, although I am everywhere, still myself is the very source of creation. So from him, everything emanates. Okay. And as the mighty wind blowing everywhere always rests in ethereal space, know that in the same manner all beings rest in. So this wind is blowing in the sky, isn't it? And then, but still it is within the sky, it doesn't go beyond that. So he says it's in the ethereal space. Same way, all of us are there within him, but he is there above us. So living entities do not rest on one thing. This is the inconceivable mystic opulence of the Lord, Yogam Aishvara. Okay. So everything that is created does not rest in me. Rest in means it is there, but it is, although everything rests in him, still is aloof and not directly concerned with the maintenance. And okay, he is not holding. This is given in the purport. He is aloof, examples of inconceivable. Abhyayam, eternally lasting. Okay. So this is the way he perceives. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, all material manifestations enter into my nature. At the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, I create. So the whole cosmic order is under me. By my will, it is manifested again and again. By my will, it is annihilated again. So everything works according to the plan of the Lord. So Dhananjaya, all this work cannot bind me. I am ever detached, seated as a though neutral. Though it looks like it's neutral, but things are all working as per his wish. As just by his glance, the whole material world is created and annihilated. So this is his relationship with creation and destruction. So why should we relate to him? Because he is the Supreme Lord. And how is he supreme? He is the one who's creating and annihilating, and he is the one, everything works under his will, under his plan. So though material world is intelligent, but still now Krishna is telling them, it is not something like it just came up, Big Bang theory, which is the scientists say. They all come up with theories of the theories, how this evoluted, and the Darwin's theory of evolution. It's not like that. It is here clearly Krishna is talking how he is the one who's creating and who is the one who is annihilating, and he is the one who's maintaining it. There is nothing evolution of species. Okay, all are there. Otherwise, by now, all of them should have become human beings. No, why should it take so long? So they are having their own assumptions and random theory. So Krishna's creation, all species of life are created immediately along with the universe at the beginning of creation, not one after another, based on desires and past deeds. So all the living creatures and all the thing which we see in this entire material world is done as soon as he creates them. Okay, it is not that it's evolved from one to the another. How the material world is maintained if Krishna especially is aloof. He is there, no supreme will is always present. Though he indirectly involved, but is there. So everything is definitely under the supreme will, because the Lord, he enters as three Vishnu forms, as we talked about the Mahatattva, and acts by his desire, which implies Krishna has no direct involvement, but acts through the material action. Creation takes place to accommodate. Why it is created? Because for our desires. Because we desire to come here, that is why he has accommodating us, various jivas, to come here and enjoy, and after that go back to him. So this is the material universe, and above that is the Vaikuntha and the Goloka, the spiritual world. This is the material universe, and we have talked about this, isn't it? Mahatattva, Karnodaksha Vishnu, Garbhodaksha Vishnu, and then into each you see the Garbhodaksha Vishnu, and then the Shirodaksha Vishnu, which enters into all the living entities to that. And we have the higher planets and the lower planets. So, Maya Dakshena Prakriti Suete Shastara Charam Hetu Nanena Kaunteya Jagat Vipra Virvartate. This material nature is working under my direction, and it is producing all moving and unmoving things by its rule. This manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. So it's very clearly, the purport is very, you can read it. Where, how here I would like to read, how he is aloof. He simply glances over material nature. Material nature is thus activated, and everything is created immediately. Because he glances over material nature, there is undoubtedly activity on the part of the Supreme Lord. But he has nothing to do with the manifestors of the material world directly. So, like this, when there is a fragrant flower before someone, the fragrance is touched by the smelling power of the person, right? But yet, the smelling and the flower are detached from one another, right? We smell the fragrance from the flower, but we are detached from it, isn't it? Same way here, this is a similar connection between the material world and Supreme Personality. He has nothing to do with this material, but he creates by his glance and ordains. In summary, material nature without the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot do anything. That he is detached from all material activities. So it's like the smelling of the first. It's a nice analogy Prabhupada gives. If you read this purports and all, it's very understandable. That's why I just pointed out to you all that. But you can read that. So when we know his opulence, his Aishwaryam, and he is the one, is the energy, is a thing, then why don't we worship him? That's a big $1 million question. Why don't we worship? So we have bought into so many traditions, so many. I mean, actually, in Indians, we are more religious and all that. We have our own way of religious practices, rituals, things. But here, Krishna says why we don't worship him. What happens? So he talks about non-worshippers and worshippers. Let us look at non-worshippers first. Fools who think Krishna is an ordinary human being possessing a temporary form become atheists and are defeated in their endeavors. Then we'll look at these qualifications of a Mahatma. So, avijnati ma muda anushim tanum ashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhota maheshwar. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominum aura. So he's telling Arjuna, when I'm here, that means he was there, no, in Dwaraka and all that. People didn't understand his transcendental nature. They thought he's just an ordinary boy, small boy. Even Brahma was confused. Even Lord Indra was also thinking how he can, such a small boy could be a supreme personality of Godhead. So when he saw Krishna lifting the Govardhan hill, he came to his senses. He saw though the form is small, but he is the supreme personality of Godhead. So fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominance. Now he's explaining why they don't. So Janananti is understanding Krishna in truth leads to liberation. This is what he said, no, in chapter 4, that if you understand the Lord and his divyam, his past activities are all divyam, then it leads to liberation. Ajananti is they don't understand, they are ignorance. So because they don't know about the Lord, they continue to be in the cycle of birth and death. They think this is the material world, is their life and everything. And they go on in that, caught into that Jaram Nitya Sagar. So they continue because they are ignorant. But he is talking of avajananati in this words. What is that meaning? They misunderstand about Krishna. Once you misunderstand about Krishna, it will lead to increased bondage. And it will increase to greater sufferings. So they can't understand that, misunderstand that. They think he is just a small boy, is not the supreme. So when you misunderstand the Lord, then it goes to, if you are ignorant of him, that is different. But here, you are misunderstanding him. So misunderstanding will lead to increased bondage and to greater sufferings. Why they misunderstand? That is talked about in this verse. Mogasya moga karmano moga gnana vichesata rakshasam asurim chaiva prakrityam mohinim shrita. Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and ethics because they want to lord over something. They want to control the thing. They want to be the master. So that's why they can't understand that he could be, the Lord Krishna could be Supreme Personality of God. This is what happened to Duryodhana, right? He thought he's doing some magic. He couldn't understand that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Duryodhana could never understand that. He was attracted by the demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, even Hiranyakashipu, he thought he got all the boons from Lord Brahma. So he was the most powerful. Even the Devatas were scared of him and nothing could defeat him, kill him. So he was bewildered by Prahlad. How he could just survive being in the fire. You put him into the fire, nothing happens. He drops him into the ocean, nothing happens. He puts him with poisonous snake, nothing happens. He's just bewildered. He can't understand how it could be. Because he had that demonic and atheistic views. In that delusion, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. Because of that, there's no hope of liberation. So this is the example of the fate of Duratma. That means, what are they? If they are bewilderment, disrespect Krishna's form, then they are attracted by the demonic and atheistic views. The hopes for liberation, fruitive activities, and culture of knowledge are all defeated. Okay. So, and you might think, why is Krishna talking about Duratma? Then he's going to talk of Mahatmas. At least we should know that we should not have such views. We should not have such demonic views. We should not And we can understand there are people like that, and we should not be like that, because if you take to such demonic views, what happens? We are caught in this material world, cycle of birth and death, liberation, future activities, and culture of knowledge. Okay, so I'll stop with this because Mahatmas will do it the next class. Okay, so I'll stop at this because if you are all the time, we can take some questions there.